So in this video tutorial series, I'm going to show you guys how to make this complete rain system inside of Blender. This thing will work with both Eevee and Cycles render engine. So there's that. And this video series was actually inspired by this guy's work, which he has done on his YouTube channel. I've given the link below. Now, if you want to learn how to do these things inside of Blender, then I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So at the end of this video, we will have this shader group here. And what this thing will do is this will give you the control to make the surface wet or dry depending on this wetness value. As you can see, if I lower this thing down, it becomes dry, and if I increase this, the surface would be wet, as you can see. Now we also have the porousness value here. What porousness means is it determines how much water the surface will absorb. Let's say if this surface is made out of mud or something like that, then this will have a porousness value closer to 1 because soil absorbs water quite much and becomes quite a bit darker than if it was, let's say, a plastic toy, something like that. Then this porousness value would be closer to 0, because if a plastic become wet, then it doesn't get darker, or the plastic doesn't absorb the water. So if I make this thing 0, and now as you can see, if I change this wetness value, the floor doesn't become dark. And if I increase the porousness to 1, now if I increase the wetness, as you can see, the surface is getting darker because it's absorbing more and more water. So let's get started. Now the textures that we need are this diffuse texture, then the displacement texture, the normal map, and the roughness map. And also you can use the specular map as well. This is the base color. It goes to the color. Before applying the normal map, make sure that you're using non-colored data. And also use a vector in the normal map node. I'm going to plug this into the normal, and make sure you also do the non-color data for this roughness map, and I'm going to plug it into this roughness. The specular map should also be a non-color data. Plug it into this specular. There we go. And for the displacement, we're going to use a glider. Now, as you can see, it looks quite good now. So to make it wet, we need to make this surface a little bit darker, because when rain falls, the surface is going to absorb the water and then it becomes a little bit darker, and also it becomes a little bit saturated as well. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in saturation node, and I'm going to crank up the saturation to 1.5, something like this. And also I'm going to make it a little bit darker by adding in mix RGB, increase the factor to 1 and change this to multiply. And then I'm going to multiply this with a value of 0.5. Make sure you're changing these values to 0.5 and not this V to 0.5. Okay, just remember this one. So as you can see, it's looking quite dark. Now I wanted to have a little bit of control over here so that I can tweak a value, and this will lerp between this value and this value. So to do so, I'm going to add in another mix RGB, and this time I'm going to keep it as mix, and I'm going to mix it between this value and this value using this fact value over here. So 1 means completely wet surface and 0 means dry. So I can tweak this value over here, but it'd be better if I just add another value node over here, and I'm going to plug this value over here. So this will work like a variable, and I can plug the 1 or 0 over here. Let's rename this to something like wetness, and this should be fine for now. Now let's work on the roughness here. So when a surface becomes wet, the surface will also become more and more reflective. So to do so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract. Let's add in a math node, and I'm going to subtract some value over here, and this value over here will be this wetness value. So I'm going to plug this wetness over here, and also change this to subtract because we're subtracting this value. And now if I make this surface wet, As you can see, it's becoming more and more reflective, but still it doesn't look right, and that is because of this specularity. Once the surface becomes wet, the specularity value comes to a value of around 0.2 or 0.3-ish. But currently it's using the default value of this specular map over here. So what I can do is I'm going to add a mix RGB, and I'm going to lerp between the default specular value and the specular value of the water, which should be around 0.3-ish. And then I need to change this value using this wetness over here. And now if I change this wetness value and make it 0, the surface becomes dry and there's no reflection or anything. But if I increase this to 1, as you can see that the surface is becoming reflective and it's looking quite fine. Also, another thing that I wanted to mention is every surface has its own porousness. As you can see, this is a brick, so the brick actually absorbs the water and that's why it becomes darker. But if this was made out of, let's say, plastic or something like that, then that surface wouldn't become darker, obviously, because the plastic doesn't absorb water. So I'm going to add a control for that over here. So I'm going to add a value, and I'm going to rename this to be porousness. This value will also go between 0 and 1, so I'm going to make it 1. Then I'm going to, before passing it over here, I'm going to multiply this value. So let's add a math node, and I'm going to change it to multiply. Let's multiply it with this and this value. Then I'm going to plug this one over here. And one nifty little thing that you can do is make sure you press the clamp button over here. It'll make sure that the color doesn't go outside the range of normal color value. So yeah, that is it. Now you can control the porousness over here. Now if, let's say, this brick is made out of plastic, so if I now change this porousness to 0, you can see that it doesn't change color. But if I change this to 1, it becomes darker. So this is working. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all of these nodes into a custom node. So let me move them over here. So this is all of the nodes that we have. Before moving these nodes into a custom node, I'm going to just press shift and right click and then drag over here so that these two pins connected into a single pin. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these, and then I'm going to press Ctrl G to make a group of that. And as you can see, it becomes a group. And if I press tab, I can go out of that, and as you can see, it's just converted into a simple little node here. Values over here, these names over here are not right and not very intuitive. So what I'm going to do to make them make sense, this input socket should be the base color because the base color is going here. So I'm going to just rename that one over here to be base color. Then this one is the roughness map. The value is the roughness map. So the value should be the roughness map. And this color one is the specular map. So I'm going to go over here, change the color one to be specular. And I'm going to make the default value of the specular to be 0.5, which it is. And also make sure in the roughness, the minimum range and the maximum range is 0 and 1 accordingly. So yeah, that is done. However, the order is not quite right here because the base color should be on top, then comes the specular and then the roughness, as you can see on the principled node. First comes the base color, then the specular, and then the roughness. So I'm going to quickly change the order as well. So first comes the base color, then comes the specular, then the roughness. And now it's looking quite good. I'm going to also do the same thing for the output. Now as you can see, this is looking pretty cool. However, currently we can't control the wetness of this node. That is because we need to add a parameter for that. So I'm going to tap into this and then see this one over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to join these. These are for the wetness, as you can see. Then I'm going to plug this thing right over here. Okay. And I'm going to change this input wetness. The default value should be set to 0 and the minimum to be 0 and max to be 1. Now I don't need this wetness slider. I'm going to do the same thing for this porousness. I'm going to just add a read-out note over here. Delete this. Maybe let's keep it for now. Plug it there. Change this input to be porousness. Default to be 0 and min max 0 and 1. Now as you can see, we have the wetness and the porousness slider. And now if I change the porousness to 1 because this is a brick and I increase the wetness, you can see it became wet. And if I reduce this down, it becomes dry. So you can add these nodes to any of the other materials and it will work just fine. Also make sure to save your scene, obviously. Let's give it a name of wetness shader. So we've saved that. And the next coming 2 videos, I'm going to work on the water drop and the water drip shader. Then we will make a full rain system inside of the Blender, which will support Eevee render engine, and it will be much faster because we are just using shader to do that.